what's up you guys? This is episode 3 of my series on LGBT classic literature. Today we are talking about the 1920s and I have 5 books to talk about. However, one of them I did not manage to get my hands on, so I will just discuss it briefly because I can't really give any opinions on it, but it sounds interesting and I wanted to mention it anyway. And then we have a special guest for today's episode. Mafalda from Mafalda is Reading sent me a clip because I just could not read another book by this author that she's talking about. I do not get on with their writing style, and I knew that Mafalda had read it recently, so I asked her if she wanted to take part in a video and she said yes and sent me a clip, which was so amazing of her. So if you enjoy what she talks about, which you definitely will, go and check out her channel. It will be linked in the description below, and make sure to subscribe because she makes amazing content. And I will also have the link to my playlist for previous episodes in this series in the description as well, so go and check that out after this one. We have episodes on the 1700s and 1800s, and then the 1900s to 1910s, and then this is the 1920s. So if you enjoy this video, please leave a like and please subscribe. It really helps out my channel, and let's just get started talking about the very first book. This first book I could not find anywhere. I could not find a physical copy, I could not find an ebook copy or anything. It is very rare, and it is Extraordinary Women by Compton, Mackenzie. This was published in 1928 and it is a satire novel set on a fictional island, and it featured caricatures of famous lesbians from the time that Compton Mackenzie personally knew, including Radcliffe Hall, who we will discuss very briefly. She wrote the next book in this video and it is a very good book, so I cannot wait to get to it. But this book sounds really interesting, obviously being a satire novel. However, scholar Terry Castle identifies the novel as participating in the dismissal of lesbian relationships as real, valid romantic relationships. So in this sense, it maybe is not so good. However, I do think it sounds pretty interesting and entertaining. So I would love to one day eventually manage to read it. However, it is very rare and I cannot give my own opinions on it because I haven't read it. I just wanted to mention it briefly because 1, it mentions Radcliffe Hall, and 2, I thought it was pretty interesting. This next book is one that I absolutely loved, and it is The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall. It was published in 1928 and it was often cited as being the first lesbian novel. Whether this is completely true or not, it is hard to tell, but in most literature it is referenced as being the first lesbian novel. So Hall knew that this book would cause a scandal when it was published, and she wrote it with the mindset that she wanted to end public silence about homosexuality and bring about a more tolerant understanding. She wanted to spread the ideas of certain sexologists of the time that she respected, and they believed that homosexuality, or as they called it, sexual inversion, was a trait that you were born with and cannot be changed. Obviously, this was not the popular mindset at the time, and even today, conversion therapy still exists in many places. I think actually including the UK, which is pretty scary, but at the time, you know, it was believed that you could cure homosexuality and it was just like a defect. But Radcliffe Hall was wanting to push this message that nope, it is something you were born with, and she does so very effectively with this novel, I believe. The book was banned in the UK, but this ban actually made the book more famous because people wanted to see what all the fuss was about, and this actually brought about a change in the way that the authorities in the UK handled sensitive subjects in books later on. They often decided after this not to bother banning at all because they realised that by banning it, they brought more attention to it than it actually probably would have had in the first place. The Well of Loneliness for many years was the only source of information on lesbianism for young people, and it remained the most popular and famous LGBT book for a pretty long time, and it had a very big impact on lesbians in the 1950s and 1960s who read it. As for the novel itself, Stephen is our main character, and right from birth she is different from other girls. She wants to have short hair, she expresses the desire to be a boy, she doesn't want to wear dresses, and her father accepts her for who she is, but her mother does not. Later she moves to Paris and becomes part of the gay scene there, which was a very big thing at the time in Paris in real life, and there she falls in love with a woman. I do have to say that this novel does have the trope that is very common from the time, that the gay character has a tragic ending. I won't say any spoilers or anything, but I still think this book is amazing regardless. I think it is well worth reading, and Stephen is an amazing character. This book is heartbreaking and heartfelt at the same time, and I absolutely loved it, and I definitely want to reread it at some point soon. I actually read this last year, so it was fun to look over my notes and stuff again and just remember like how much I loved this book when I read it. What I find interesting is reading this through a modern lens. It is very easy to read Stephen as actually being a transgender character. The way that she expresses the desire to be a boy, and the clothes that she wears, and just a lot of stuff about the way that she expresses herself. I wonder if this story was written today, whether Stephen would be a transgender character. And I also think it's pretty interesting if you look at Radcliffe Hall's life. She, later on in life, only wore men's clothing. She presented herself as being very, very masculine. She actually asked people to refer to her as John. She stopped going by the name Radcliffe and started going by the name John. I'm pretty sure. I can't remember if it's John right now. I'll put it on the screen if not. But yeah, I think that it's an interesting discussion. There's obviously ongoing dialogue and conversations about, you know, butch lesbians and transgender, and that is a whole kettle of fish that or can of worms, I don't know what the phrase is, I'm not educated in, but I think that when you're reading this book, it is hard to not acknowledge that it reads very similar to the way that you would imagine a transgender story to be read if it was written today. So, Well of Loneliness is well worth reading, and I highly recommend it. Quicksand by Jun'ichirō Tanizaki was written in serial format between 1928 and 1930, and this is a Japanese novel that explores bisexuality in an interesting and rather twisted way. We start off following a woman who is in a little bit of a boring marriage. She goes to college and meets another woman, and they begin an affair, and eventually a fourth person is brought in, and the relationships all become so toxic, so manipulative. Everyone is so jealous and they're all lying to each other, and it is so much fun to read. I found this book so addicting and I cannot put it down. The characters were all very unlikable in the fun way where you are enjoying how unlikable they are. It doesn't make you want to stop reading, it makes you want to read even more. And you don't know who to root for or whether you're even supposed to root for anyone at all, but that is just part of the fun. I really did enjoy reading this book. I could have read it in one sitting if I didn't have to go to bed because of work. This is a very, very quick book to read. The relationships in this book are the definition of toxic, but that is what makes it so fun in my opinion. It was just so fun to read, like, because every time you think that they're done lying, they take it to the next level and they manipulate each other even more, and the author isn't trying to pretend that this is a healthy relationship. Like, it is very much on the nose, like, this is toxic, these people are horrible, but that was just so much fun. The sexuality aspect of this book is very interesting because for the two women, it plays a very key role. However, it's never really discussed and it's never mentioned in a judgmental way or anything. This was written in 1928 to 1930, so it's quite old. It's almost 100 years old, and it reads really modern, I thought. It was like a really modern and fresh take on the subject of sexuality, and some of the characters weren't heterosexual. They were, you know, it's never specifically said that they are bisexual, but they are obviously not straight. Like, the women are in love with each other, and it's never made into like a big thing. It's just how the characters are. So I really like that approach, but not making it a big deal. From what I can find online, this book didn't really have like a big societal impact. It didn't make a big impression. However, I wanted to talk about it anyway because it's a Japanese novel. Like I said, it's a very modern feeling take on the subject, and it's just so much fun. Like, I really enjoyed reading this book. It was a 5-star, and I didn't think it was going to be like a new favourite, but it has been like stuck in my mind ever since I finished it.
Hello, it's Mafalda from the channel Mafalda is Reading, and Connor asked me to fill you guys in on Orlando by Virginia Woolf, so that's what I'm here to do. Orlando, a biography, was published in 1928, and it is called a biography because it basically follows the adventures of a poet named Orlando. And this poet not only lives for a bunch of centuries and meets with a lot of key figures in the English literary scene, but also changes sex throughout the novel. So the book starts off with Orlando as a man, but halfway through the novel he becomes a she and becomes a woman and wakes up one day as a woman. And so this book deals a lot with gender roles and identity and sexuality, and it is a very important work in the gender studies and transgender studies as well because of what it deals with, because Orlando shifts from men to women in this book, and it is probably one of the most unique things about it. And another interesting thing about this book is that this book is not only dedicated to, but also a lot of the inspiration from the aspects of the book are taken from Virginia Woolf's lover, who was Vita Sackville-West, and she was also a poet and a novelist. Vita and Virginia had a very tumultuous romantic relationship that lasted 10 years, and so a lot of the characters characteristics and details of the character of Orlando in this book are taken as inspiration from Vita Sackville-West. And surprisingly, even though this book deals with a lot of taboo topics for the 1920s, like gender and identity, this book was actually critically and financially a success. And the book was not only seen as a high piece of literature, but also as kind of a gossipy novel about the relationship between Virginia and Vita. People wanted to know more, I get why. And yeah, this was kind of like an inside look into their relationship and how Virginia saw Vita. And maybe that's why people liked it so much at the time, because people are nosy naturally, so. And now my personal opinion of the book, I think Virginia Woolf's writing isn't for everyone, and that's also why Connor asked me to fill in on this book, because he didn't want to read another Virginia Woolf book, and I get that because her writing is very hard to follow. And this book specifically is a book that you have to be paying your full attention to it. It's also not that big, but still, I think it could take you more than reading like a YA fantasy book that is 400 pages, because there's so much fact into this book, especially because the character of Orlando lives for many centuries, so he comes across a lot of different characters, and there's actually like a little list at the end of all of the characters that he meets and the pages that they're at, because it's really hard to like grasp everything on your first go and on your first read. And there's a lot of annotated versions of Orlando so you can grasp the story better and understand everything that's going on, because it's very hard to follow in any Virginia Woolf book, but this one even more than the other ones. And that's mainly my biggest concern with the book. But at the same time, I think this book discusses a lot of really interesting things, especially about gender and identity. I think it's so interesting to see a person that wrote this in the late 20s talking about basically being transgender, because we could consider Orlando as a transgender character written in the 1920s, which I think is just so fascinating and just really out there for Virginia Woolf to write a transgender character at the time. And that's the part that I like the most about the book, just all of the discussions and all of the topics that Virginia Woolf approaches in terms of gender and identity in this book. I just think it's fascinating from a book from the 1920s. So yeah, Orlando by Virginia Woolf from 1928.
The next book I want to talk about is Passing by Nella Larsen. And I just want to quickly say that Nella Larsen actually wrote a novel called Quicksand that was published in 1928. And I realised upon doing research for this video, obviously I was searching, Quicksand 1928, looking for the Japanese novel, and I found out that Nella Larsen also wrote one called Quicksand in the same year. And I just thought it was like such a weird coincidence, because there's only like 5 authors being discussed in this video, and 2 of them both happened to write a book called Quicksand in the same year. I just thought it was pretty interesting to point out. It's not really relevant. But anyway, Passing was published in 1928, and it is a very short novel. You can read it in one sitting, about 2 African American women who can both pass for white. Irene is not passing. She is very much immersed in the African American community, and she's proud of who she is, whereas Claire is passing for white, and she has completely cut herself off from her past, and not even her husband, who is very racist, knows that she's actually not white. So I found the discussion of race issues to be very interesting and very unique from other books on the topic that I have read in the past. Larsen is an extremely talented writer. I definitely want to read more books by her, especially Quicksand I just mentioned. She interweaves various themes so seamlessly in such a short amount of time. This is a very, very short book, but it really leaves an impact on you. It's so well written, and like I said, the themes are just like perfectly crafted together. They're all put in so subtly that even though the entire story is about race, it also still feels like such a subtle, natural way of discussing things, and I absolutely loved that. I knew going in that the LGBT themes were going to be very, very subtle, and you had to read between the lines for them, like to find them basically. And for these themes, there definitely is homoerotic undertones to the entire novel, but my conclusion on it is that if you didn't go into this novel looking for them, you could easily miss them and read this as just a friendship between 2 women. It's very much up to the individual reader's experience, I believe, as to what you take away from this book. The race topic and the race issues discussed are very much at the forefront, and then the LGBT themes are much more subtle, and it's very much in the subtext, and you have to read between the lines. If you are looking for it, it's definitely there, and it really adds to the experience. And I think it makes Irene's motivations make a lot more sense when you're looking for this and know that it's there. However, if you were not looking for it in this book, you could easily miss it, I think. So I thought it was quite interesting. And there is a section on Wikipedia about this that discusses, you know, why it's maybe so subtle, which I thought was interesting, and I will leave the link down to it in the description. But yeah, I thought this book was amazing. I think it's still really relevant today. The topics it discusses are very important and interesting, and I think that this book is much more relevant in terms of literature about race than literature about sexuality. However, regardless of how you go into it and what you're looking for in this book, you will enjoy it regardless. So that was all of the books that I read and know about from the 1920s that discuss LGBT themes. If you've read any others and have any suggestions, definitely let me know in the comments down below. Especially, you know, translated works. I'm sure there's some out there that are just not commonly known about that maybe you do know about. So I would love to be made aware of them. And I hope you also enjoyed Mafalda's little cameo. Definitely 100% please go and check out her channel, subscribe to her and watch her content. She is amazing and such a nice person. And it was so kind of her to take part in this video and send a clip in for me. So again, thank you so much to Mafalda. And then also thank you to you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It definitely helps my channel. And if you want to see future videos in this series and in all my other videos as well, hit the subscribe button. And again, let me know your thoughts on all of these books, or if you have any other book suggestions, let me know. And then hopefully the video on the 1930s will be out very soon. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.